Hi, everybody, and welcome back. So I just have a blank workbook open. And remember, if you don't know how to do that, you can do it by clicking this File button here, or File tab, I should say. And then you can open, and you can open a file, or you can click New, and then you can go to a blank workbook right here and just click that. So I am already there, and I just have a blank workbook open. So in this video, I want to talk just a little bit about entering data and then kind of formatting some of your basic formatting your columns and your rows, just so we can see all the data here. So I'm going to kind of follow partly along with your book and just kind of enter some information. So let's pretend that initial file that we saw in the last video wasn't created yet. So, a lot of times, I gave you a file to work with, to kind of play around with, but in the real world, you're probably going to be creating those files yourself from scratch. So you're going to have to learn how to enter words and data and things like that into Excel. So I'm going to follow along with your text here, or at least partly along with your text, and just kind of work on entering some data here. So let's say that we are designing or planning a conference. So I'm just going to, write a title up top. So maybe this is our MWCC conference. So kind of giving a title in that A1 slot to what I'm going to be talking about in this paper. And I may want to put the author here. So I'm just going to click into cell A3 and I can write the word author. You can also hit enter and it will go to the next cell down, or you can use the tab feature and it will move to the right. My favorite is just to use the little arrows on my laptop and move around that way. So for the author, I'm going to put my name in. And again, I'm really just playing around here and practicing. I'm going to go ahead and I want to enter the date. And then maybe I want to enter the purpose of this Excel workbook. So my purpose is going to be to estimate expenses at the MWCC conference. Okay, so I'm just entering some basic data here. And my date today, or whatever date you want, let's just put in January 1st as our date, do 2023. So we just have some basic data in here. I may want to rename sheet 1. And I can right click and hit rename, or I can double click at the bottom there. And I think your book recommends to call this documentation. And when I'm done, I just hit enter and my sheet is renamed. Now, there's some things I may want to do here. So if I notice and I look, I can see my name is running into sort of 2 cells, but it's actually not in cell C3. If I click C3, I look and it's blank. So Stephanie Pollard is typed into cell B3 only, but it's kind of running over so I can read it. If I started typing something else in C, so maybe there were 2 authors, I'm going to put the name and, I don't know, Joe Smith, right? Now that word and is cutting off my name, right? Because we can't see it. So there's different ways that you can change your column widths. My favorite way is to just highlight that column. And by highlighting it, I literally just clicked the B. And then if you move over, you'll get this little, I guess, plus sign in between. And you can use that to adjust the column width. So I can manually adjust it to however I want to. You can also adjust it by using the home feature. And then over here under cells, for format, you can see column width right there. So if you want to do it more manually, so I'm using a column width of 15.55, maybe I want to use 18, I can just change that and it will adjust that way as well. So that's another way that you can go ahead and adjust those widths. And we can do the same thing with our row heights too. So maybe I want to adjust my row height. I can select the row and then you'll see like in between, you can get these little plus signs, and then you can change your row height that way as well. You can also do it here under the home key and row height. So if I want to go ahead and change it that way, I can do it like that too. So there's different ways to go ahead and adjust those heights and widths. Okay. A couple other things you can do, little shortcuts here. If I look at this cell right here, B5, it really goes quite long. So there's a couple ways that I can fix that. So one way is to kind of bring this little plus sign up. And if I double click that plus sign, it will expand that column width to the longest typed cell. So you can see that originally I had it like, maybe like this, and that cell was going too long. So what I can do is just bring that little plus sign up again next to the column that I'm looking at to the right. And then I double click, and it will expand it to whatever the longest cell is. So that's another way that you can kind of quickly make sure that all your cell information is there. The problem with that, though, is sometimes if you have a lot of columns, you may want to try to read your data all in one page as best you can. And if your columns are all this wide, it's going to be very difficult to see all the data at once, or at least mostly at once. So we also can do something called wrapping the text. So maybe this column is too wide, and I would really like to keep it about that wide instead. What I can do is click on that cell. And then I can right click as well here. And you can do a lot of different things here. You could clear the contents, which deletes that cell. It doesn't delete the actual cell, just deletes what's inside the cell, which is different than deleting an entire row or column. So clear literally just clears out what is in the cell. It doesn't delete the column or the row or anything like that. But what I want to do for this one, because I want to make it easier to read, is I can go to Format Cells here. And I can do lots of different things here. So we can change the category of the data, which I'll talk about in a second. But under Alignment, you can see something called Wrap Text. And then you also have things like Merge Cells that will allow us to put two cells together, which is pretty cool. But for right now, I can click just wrap my text, and you'll see that it will make that text go down the line so that it stays within that width. And then I can adjust it and it will accommodate that appropriately. So again, that is, you can either do it as a right click and then hit Format Cells, and you're wrapping your text there. So again, even for, that's really nice for longer cells so that you don't have to keep making your columns super wide. Or you can also go up here under the cells and you have that format cell right there also. So if you don't see anything that you need right here, you may want to go in and hit the full format cell there at the bottom. And there's a lot of other features there that we're going to get through throughout the course. I want to tell you like everything today, but I can't, right? It'll be too much. So that's a couple ways you can deal with cells that have a lot of words in them. You could expand your widths, you could expand your heights of your rows, but you could also use that wrap text feature to make sure that you can still see all that cell content, and it's not too wide. It's a little bit easier to work with. Now, the other thing that you can do, and I'm just going to kind of play around here. All right, so let's say I have a zip code that I want to enter, or a date. So you could see before that my date kind of got reformatted when I typed in 01/01/2023 and I hit enter. It took away those zeros. So it is common for Excel to remove leading zeros, which for a number, right? If I was just typing in, I don't know, my age, and let's say a child's age is 8, and I wrote 08 and it changed it to 8, that's not a big deal, right? But if I have a zip code, that is a big deal. So sometimes you may have to format your cells. And again, you can right click on that, or you can just go to Cells Format and bring up the full format cell here. And under the number category, you're able to change how Excel reads that data. So it usually defaults to general, but if you need it to be more specific, number typically, and you can adjust this to the number of decimal places you want, but you could use it as decimal places. And again, that doesn't help a zip code here though. They have a currency feature, so we'll automatically put in that $sign for you. And you can kind of play around, with date, time, percentage, and so on. But what happens is I really want one that makes this look like a zip code. And the one that works there is going to be text. So text will treat it as text and not a number. So I can go ahead and fix that 0, and then it will now read as a real zip code. So for numbers that really don't work like regular numbers, right? You're not going to be adding zip codes. You're not going to be multiplying zip codes. That doesn't make sense. The same thing with dates, right? You're not going to add 2 dates together. You're not going to multiply dates and things like that. You do probably want to reformat those. So again, what I did is I clicked the cell. I went here to format. And then I went into format cell and I changed it to just text. So by doing so, Excel treats it just as words rather than a number. So it's not getting rid of that leading 0 that I need here. Now you do want to be careful because Excel is not reading this as a number anymore. So again, if you're doing formulas and things, then that's not what you want to do here. But a zip code is not something that we should be multiplying or adding or doing anything like that with. So it's perfectly fine to change that to text so that we're reading it correctly. Now, you see this little green mark here? That little green mark is Excel telling you that they think you have an error. And if you click that, it will kind of tell you what they think the error is. And they're saying, hey, your error is that you have a number stored as text. But I'm going to ignore that error because I know that's what I wanted to do here. I'm not going to be using that number in any calculations. It's just a zip code. So I'm going to ignore this error and leave it. So if you see that little green bar there, it's Excel saying, hey, I think you may have a mistake here. It doesn't mean that you do, but it's giving you kind of a warning to double check this. For dates too, again, you can format that cell as well. And this one automatically accepted it as a date. So you have that formatting there. But you could also change the different way that we write a date if you prefer. So I'm just going to kind of leave it as the usual one. But you can change that formatting here, bring in time if you need to, etc. You can read in your book also about international dating. So, the US does dates differently than other countries. So if you're working internationally, you may have a different format that you want to use. So that's something to read in your text or look into with your own company. I know I had a friend actually who worked in banking, and she actually was a psychology major, so you never know what you're going to do. But she worked international. So she worked very early morning hours because that worked better for most of her clients. So for her, time zones and things like that, and the dating, how they wrote the dating was extremely important because it needed to be able to be read by everybody in the group, no matter which time zone you were in or how your country formatted dates. So just something to keep in mind that when you choose your formatting, you want to make sure that everybody understands and is interpreting it correctly. So that's just a little bit about how you can enter data into cells. Some of that data may just be words, right? So a title, the author, date, purpose, or information like zip codes or numbers like age or cost or things like that. So I encourage you for this part to obviously take some notes, but now go and try it. So open up a blank document or open up a document that is already created that I've posted for you guys and just play around. So practice entering some information, practice changing the formatting of your cells, right? Making it a text or making it a date, leaving it as a number, for instance. And just entering that information. So it's the best thing you can do is practice. So at this point, I encourage you to take a break, go to an Excel file, go to your text, and try to follow along with some of the steps. So create those titles, change those widths, those columns, those rows, add some worksheets in, rename things, save things, open new files, and really just practice entering that data. And when you're ready, come back to the next video.